sitting behind him in the black suit over there is my son Stephen Elliott, so he's part of it too.
I can see it for us.
So you may begin to time me, Don. I entered the Boston University School of Theology in September of 1955. And on December 1st, 2 months later, in December 1st to be exact, a young woman by the name of Rosa Parks was getting on a bus on her way home from work, and she was very tired. She sat in the black section of the bus, and as the bus continued along, they picked up several white people. And the bus driver came to the back of the bus, which was segregated, and said to the 4 black people, "You have to get up and give your seats to the white people." And 3 of the black men got up and did that. But Rosa Parks said, "I've had enough. I refuse to leave my seat." So she was arrested, she was put in jail, and the next day there was a meeting held in the basement of that Baptist church, and there were many people there, and they got together and formed a movement which was to be called the Civil Disobedience Movement, and they were going to pass out pamphlets to the 40,000 blacks that lived in Montgomery, Alabama at that time. The pastor of that church was new. He had just received his doctorate in philosophy, and he was a graduate of Boston University School of Theology a year before I got there, and his name was Martin Luther King. So the next day they had to boycott, and they walked everywhere. The blacks walked and walked and walked for 382 days, which comes to 1 year and 17 days exactly, until the bus lines, fearing bankruptcy, were forced to submit, and they integrated the buses. This won the racial war. And it was won by using a weapon that Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa, almost 40 years before Mandela, had used in South Africa against the British. They also boycotted the buses. Gandhi used what was called satyagraha in the Indian language, but which Dr. King changed to the non-violent civil disobedience. And he was taught that at Boston University. And he was also taught that any moral, social revolution or any radical change in society must be done in that way in order to succeed, and we must use political means. To understand Boston University and to understand Martin Luther King, you had to understand Mahatma Gandhi. He was one of our heroes, second to Jesus. And, for instance, most Americans believe in a strong separation of religion and politics. Gandhi felt just the opposite. Gandhi said that the purpose of religion, or religion itself, has nothing to do, and anyone that believes that religion has nothing to do with politics does not understand what the word religion means. He said, I only got involved in politics because politics encircles us today like a huge, strong snake which is crushing us and from which we cannot escape. And I intend to wrestle with that snake. And he did. Gandhi was assassinated on January 30th of 1948, and he believed strongly that a man's inner spirit of love and truth is more powerful than any force in the world. And he died for that belief. But when they found his remains of his little room afterwards, they found only his entire fortune, which was a pair of old spectacles, a pair of sandals, a white cloth to cover him, and most significant of all, a well-worn, well-used copy of the New Testament, which he read continuously because he believed that Jesus Christ was a great man. And he heard from the New Testament the words of Jesus when he said, "Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. I am the way and the truth and the life. Those that take the sword and live by the sword shall die by the sword." The professors at Boston University taught that to Martin Luther King Jr., and from 1955 to 1958, they taught it to me as well.
Thank you, Bob. I started seminary in 1969. As Bob was speaking, I was reminded of kind of a cultural event that happened during I believe my first year of seminary, and that was the killing of students at Kent State University. I can remember hearing about that when two of my friends from the University of Akron, where I did my undergraduate work, were visiting me at Gettysburg. And my first year was spent on the campus of Lutheran Theological Seminary in Gettysburg, where all of us went to school was about 60 miles from Kent. The University of Akron is about 60 miles from Kent State. And often on Fridays, we would take a train. We didn't have cars. Cars were in existence at that time, but we didn't have cars normally as students in college or in seminary. So when I was in college, we used to go up to Kent on Fridays. University of Akron, and I started in engineering, was an engineering school. And so we had more males at that time, because engineering was a male profession at that time at the University of Akron. Kent was a teaching school, so we would often go up to Kent on weekends to enjoy Friday nights with the fraternities and sororities up in Kent. And so when that happened, not only was it a defining moment for all of our society, it certainly had another impact on my life. And at that point, when I was in seminary, I was pretty traditionally Lutheran conservative. Went into seminary to be the Lutheran, or before I went into seminary, when I was a little bit younger, I thought I could be the Lutheran Billy Graham. And so came to it from that perspective, pretty much believing the Bible being almost the inerrant Word of God. And it was in seminary that it started changing. Seminary comes from a root word that means seedbed, and seminary is often the seedbed for changes in people. And when I went, I thought I was going to be this radicalizing force in seminary. I never set foot on the seminary campus until the day of my first registration for classes. I was living in New Jersey at the time, a lot of friends in Ohio. I figured somewhere in between Ohio and New Jersey would be a good place to go to seminary, and so I chose Gettysburg for that reason. And because I didn't like some people coming out of Philadelphia that I knew in their theology. It just wasn't quite what I wanted. Okay. 3 minutes left or 2? 2 minutes left. During that time, I went into seminary thinking that I would basically be a chaplain on a college campus, because that's where I felt my call to seminary happened, was when I was at Akron. By the time I graduated seminary, we had ordained our first woman in the LCA at that time, Elizabeth Platts at the University of Maryland. I was present at her ordination. By the time we got to my graduation, there was actually a moratorium on white males entering the college chaplaincy, because we were so dominated by white males, and so that changed. So my seminary took in the time where we started the anti-Vietnam, when I spent 2 years down in D.C. of seminary, spent some of that time protesting the war, lived with Paulist priests. It was in an ecumenical setting. And so it was one of the greatest experiences that I had living in D.C. during that time, and also living with progressive Roman Catholics. The Vatican II happened just before that, so they were all experiencing Vatican II. It's taken 60 years, not 60 years, it's taken 32 years from the time a little more than that, 35 years, since the time I graduated seminary to now, to start to see the church in terms that we were taught 60 years ago. Worker priests, different things than your traditional parish and moving out into the community. And so that's what I see also as the future. I think the parish will stay here, but it's going to have a different form in the future. And so now I turn it over